our NFL draft preview show. Tomorrow is the draft. Thursday, April 29th, 7 o'clock, the first Gozilla media event. We will be at Hooters of Albany on Wolf Road. Looking forward to that event. We're giving away free stuff. That's right, top 10 picks, a pick, a prize, a pick, a prize, 1 through 10. And we're giving you a cheat sheet right now. NFL reporter Matt Verderame, Fansided, joining us to help us break down this year's draft. Join us again, Wolf Road, Hooters of Albany, for NFL Draft Night, Gozilla Media's first live event. Matt, let's start at the top. Jacksonville Jaguars, Trevor Lawrence, almost been locked in at this pick for about 2 years now. Is it crazy to say that when we evaluate Trevor Lawrence, he should be in the discussion like John Elway, Peyton Manning, Andrew Luck, is truly one of the great quarterback prospects of all time, and maybe even when you look at his college career, better than those three guys?
I think he's definitely in that group. Now, does that mean he's going to have the career those guys have had? Who knows? But in terms of a prospect, for sure. I mean, we've been talking about Trevor Lawrence being the number one pick now for years. This is not like a guy who this is not Joe Burrow, who was nobody and then had a great year and went number one overall. Not to say Joe Burrow doesn't deserve it, but I'm just saying like he was more okay, wow, he had a great year. All right, let's take a look. Does he deserve to be number one? Sure. Okay, fine. Trevor Lawrence, since he carved up Alabama years ago in the national title game, has been someone that teams have been waiting for. This is a guy who most people believe is a generational talent. That term gets thrown around a little bit, but it really does apply with him. When you look at his game, there's not too many things not to like. I really think if he stays healthy, he's going to be an elite quarterback. I don't think there's any reason to believe he won't be. I do worry about where he's going a little bit. Like, Jacksonville doesn't exactly have a track record of developing talent. But he's so talented. He's so polished already. And I do think they have some talent around him on offense. Like, look, James Robinson is a really good young running back. DJ Chark can play, right? Like, Laviska Shenault can play. So, and the line's not terrible. So I do think he actually is in a decent position. Now, my biggest question with Jacksonville coming out of this and into the season is Urban Meyer a good head coach at the pro level? Because I know he was great in college. I've seen a lot of guys who are great in college who can't coach in the pros. So that is, to me, the big looming question with Jacksonville. But I think Lawrence is going to be big time. Totally
agree with you. And I think matching up to guys like Manning and Elway of the past, John Elway coming out of college struggled to have a winning record at Stanford. Peyton Manning's biggest knock was that he couldn't win a bowl game, not a national championship, not the SEC, a bowl game. And the biggest knocks on Trevor Lawrence have been, well, he had COVID-19, which is a serious issue, but the recent report that he may not like football as much as we hope, like, that's it. Like, those are the big criticisms that have been Lawrence. And I know he had, I think, minor surgery on his non-throwing shoulder, but anytime you have surgery, it's usually just minor if it's not you. So, look, the knocks aren't there like the other quarterback prospects. But we move to number 2, the New York Jets. There's been talk of Zach Wilson. Does it make sense to take the BYU quarterback here at 2, or should they have kept Darnold, or maybe even take somebody else?
So, look, I think the Jets were right in trading Darnold. I actually think he's got some talent, but at the same point, like, I talked to a few sources in the league, decision makers at the end of the season, and said, what do you think Darnold's worth? And the consensus was a third-round pick. So the Jets ended up doing better than that. I think they got pretty good value for him. When a lot of the league that I spoke to, again, it was like, hey, if they get a third, that's solid. That's what I would give up. Okay. Now, I have talked to some people in the league who are personnel evaluators who feel like Lawrence is the obvious number one. People I've talked to love Fields. And the thought with Wilson, at least with one prominent scout who's been in the league for more than a quarter of a century, said, listen, he's got all the talent in terms of he's big, he's strong, he's got a big arm. The question with Wilson was at BYU, he played by a very good offensive line. He's very rarely under pressure. He's going to be under pressure with the Jets. So how does he handle that? That is the concern. Now, look, you could have the same concern for other guys, but I'm just saying that is the concern in the league about Wilson is it's a 7-on-7 drill a lot of times. They didn't ask him to do a ton. He only really had that 1 year that kind of put him on the radar. Now, that's fine. There are a lot of guys who have 1 year really good in college and go on to have very good pro careers, but those are the knocks. That said, if you're the Jets, I don't mind them going with him here. I like Fields. I really do. I understand that that's a split opinion, but I think if you're the Jets, you have to have a quarterback. You're not winning anything in the NFL in 2021 if you don't have a quarterback. And Darnold had shown nothing, and Douglas didn't draft him, and Saleh obviously was not there when they took him. So I get it. They want to start fresh, but they got to be right. Like everybody always talks about, all these teams are going to find quarterbacks. No, they're not. No, they're not. Like of these 5 quarterbacks, history says 2 of them are going to be good. And, I did an article on this. It was about the 49ers actually, but I did the research that since 2006, it's 2006, there have been 29 quarterbacks taken in the top 10 picks. Of those 29 quarterbacks, the only quarterbacks to be a first-team All-Pro, Cam Newton, Matt Ryan, Patrick Mahomes. Wow. Mahomes is the only one to win a Super Bowl. So, and those are the only 3 MVPs as well, by the way. But if you are going to draft a quarterback that high, okay, they don't have to be Mahomes, but they probably should be Matt Ryan. They probably should be at least Cam Newton. Like, of those 29 guys, 19 of them were flat-out busts. So if you think Lawrence is generational and going to be a guy, that means one of those other 4 quarterbacks on average is going to be good. If you go and look, in the history of the draft, the only time there have been 2 franchise-level quarterbacks in the top 10, 2004 with Rivers and Manning, and 1971 with Plunkett and Archie Manning. That's it. So I get what the Jets are doing, but yeah, they're fighting history. That's for sure.
Yeah, and that comparison there, you touched on Fields versus Wilson. Lawrence and Fields have been the number 1 players in the country since high school. Like it was Fields, Lawrence, Fields. Everyone knew how good they were when they were teenagers. They get to the college level, they're that good. You mentioned the one season Wilson really had because he had been the starter before 2020. He was better than Justin Fields in September and October because Ohio State wasn't playing. Like the Big Ten didn't kick off until November, basically, and Wilson's tearing it up against bad teams. He played really well. He was the best player in the country going into November before the players from Alabama and others caught up to him. But it's crazy to think that we're going to say we're going to ignore what Fields did in high school, again, a different level, but in college in 2019 at Ohio State, in 2020, throws 6 touchdowns against Clemson. We're going to ignore all that because Wilson looked good against bad teams, and his worst game was against Coastal Carolina. Just the theory of that stuff. Oh, and he has got injury concerns too, Wilson. I just don't get why it's not Fields over Wilson. Yeah. But with that being said, I think it's an easy transition to the Niners. You touched on them already. It's as simple as whoever the Jets don't take at 2, they're going to take that other quarterback at 3, or Mac Jones, Trey Lance in the conversations out on the West Coast.
Dude, if they take Mac Jones, I'm going to have an aneurysm. I'm not a Niners fan. I just cover the league. I mean, I never hid the fact I'm a Chiefs fan, but I was just actually texting a GM about this like 2 days ago. I was like, if they take Mac Jones, I'm going to write a column hotter than the sun. Like, you traded up 9 spots, gave up multiple first-round picks, also a third-round pick, a top 100 pick. Like, you gave up all that to go get a guy who plays behind the best offensive line in football. Like I talked about Zach Wilson never being under pressure. Go watch Mac Jones. He's got four first-round wide receivers on his team over the last 2 years. And look, I'm not knocking the fact he's been surrounded by talent. Like, that's not his fault. That's fine. But you do have to factor that into the equation a little bit. Like, the man has played with like a pro team around him. And I get he's accurate. Well, he should be accurate. He's never hit. I worry about with Jones the lack of mobility. In today's game, you really are at a disadvantage if you don't have some mobility. You don't have to be Lamar Jackson, but you got to have some ability to move like a Josh Allen, a Mahomes, Rodgers. Yes. Can you still be good without mobility? Sure. I mean, we've seen Matt Ryan have a nice career. We've seen Tom Brady have an incredible career. But the game is changing. And the Niners, specifically with Kyle Shanahan, that's an offense. There's so much creative stuff. They move and they dip and they dive and everything else. Like they are an offense that having a mobile quarterback is such a positive. And to just put Mac Jones back there, I don't get. Now, look, I understand if they don't take Trey Lance, why? The accuracy's been a concern. They only played 1 game last year due to COVID. Like, I get it. I understand that they look at Trey Lance and they just don't feel like he's worth a top 3 pick. I don't get it with Fields. I do not get it. And I think the biggest sin that every team makes in the draft, they overthink it. They get way too deep into like, well, I don't know. He had a bad game against Northwestern. Who cares? Who cares? Why does anyone care? It's like when Mahomes came out. I remember, again, going back to 2017, Chiefs fan, I knew they needed a quarterback. I sat there and I poured over the film. I remember watching Deshaun Watson and thinking, okay, I don't know if he's got the arm strength that I want, but he's a really talented kid. I watched Trubisky and thought to myself, he's Andy Dalton, which in fairness was a slam apparently against Andy Dalton. And I watched Mahomes and thought to myself, this kid's footwork is atrocious. Like it's comically bad, but he is so effing talented that if a coach with chops gets his hands on this guy, this kid's going to be great. Now, I didn't think he'd be this. I don't think anybody thought he'd be this, but I thought he could be a Pro Bowl level player. And God knows, by the way, I'm wrong all the time. I thought J.J. Watt was going to be terrible. Well, he's been okay. He might make it. But my point is not really my analysis, but you hear teams now and they look back and go, yeah, but we thought Mahomes, he played in the spread, played in the air raid. Who cares? The guy can throw the ball 60 yards off his back foot accurately. And I think that's what gets lost. Like Fields' talent to me, if I'm the Niners and he's there, that's who I'm taking. Period. End of story. But I don't know that they're going to go that route.
Yeah, to touch on both Mac Jones and Trey Lance there, I love that point you made there, that this super analysis that everybody's got a mock draft, everybody's got to take. I love the film guy on Twitter that just finds the one play. Josh Allen and Bills fans on this particular. Like anytime Josh Allen had an overthrow, Twitter smart guy wanted to show it. I told you he's not accurate. What happens is that like the less and less we know about somebody, somehow that makes them better. Like I feel like Trey Lance is a great example of. They played one game in 2020.
Yes.
He really hasn't been on the field that much. So because he's not, and I know he didn't throw an interception in a long time. Oh, now he's great. Not necessarily. Mac Jones was a third string quarterback. Like I can't wrap my mind around three quarterbacks on one college roster all being basically NFL starters. At one point, because he's going to be a top 5 pick, right? Like it's crazy to me.
Look, by the way, you bring up a great point. So this is the thing that drives me crazy when people are like, put in the backup quarterback. It's like, you only like him because you haven't seen him screw up yet.
Yes.
Like, stop. Just stop. Like, the coach that's there every day, that his job depends on it. Like, he sees these guys every day. Like, he's not sitting the guy at quarterback because it's like the long game to have this great renaissance. They're sitting him because he's not as good as the guy in front of him. That's why he's sitting. Because he's not that good. Like, yeah, sure. There are the random examples of a guy coming in and Wally pipping whoever's in front of him, right? But the reality is, teams, I love the fan bases that do this. Let's give so-and-so a shot. So-and-so's terrible. There's a reason he's on the bench. And it's just, it never ceases to amaze me, man. But you're right. It's like the old Family Guy thing. Like, Peter, you could have this boat or this box. And it's like, all right, well, I could just take the boat. That'd be really nice. But no, I'm going to take the box. Turns out there's like a $20 gift certificate to like Denny's in it. Right? Like, but people choose the box because they're greedy. And so it could be better. It could be a key to a Jaguar in there, right? Like, and I just think with Trey Lance, like if he plays 2 more years, maybe that helps him. But I do think people talk themselves into him to some extent because, well, we just haven't seen him. What about this upside? My dad has a saying. Potential is a fancy word for saying you've never done a damn thing. Now, I don't know if that applies to Trey Lance. May not. I'm not saying it does. But whenever you hear that term, and you're going to hear it during the draft, this guy only had 2 sacks in 3 years, but he's got potential. He wouldn't have potential if he was already good. He'd just be good.
Yeah, as a Syracuse football coach, formerly Scott Schaefer used to say, potential gets you fired because you haven't proven what that potential is yet.
It's so true.
Yeah, it is. Just because we're talking about Alabama, let's just look at that overall team that's having these players come out. I'm kind of focusing on the skill guys there. Devonte Smith, the Heisman Trophy winner, Jalen Waddle, Najee Harris. Could we see all these guys go in the first round? And in particular, Smith and Waddle, do you feel like there's 1 or 2 teams that could be a really good fit for those guys?
So Matt Lombardo, who works us over Fanside as well as an NFL insider, great guy, great friend. And if you don't follow him on Twitter, covered the Giants for years. He's been sniffing around, and I don't want to speak for him, but I know that he's written this. Like there's a thought that the Giants like Devonte Smith quite a bit. Devonta Smith, rather, excuse me. Now the question with him is he's 166 pounds. Like, you get these draft experts on Twitter who will sit there and scream, "Hey, it doesn't matter he's 166 pounds. Don't be a hater." Yeah, well, it matters when Tyrann Mathieu comes screaming down from the high post and snaps him in half. Then It kind of matters. And some teams are going to feel like that, by the way. Some teams are going to not have him on their board because they're going to say, there's no way in hell we're not taking the guy who weighs 166 pounds. I mean, it's unprecedented, okay, for a first-round pick. That said, there are going to be teams that go, I don't care that he weighs 166 pounds. Doesn't matter to me. He was incredibly productive in the SEC. We love his game. We're going to take him. I do think his weight drops him a little bit. I think he's going to be the third receiver off the board. I think Chase is going to be a top 6 pick. I don't think he falls behind. Miami, to me, is taking Pitts or Chase, whoever's there. If they're both there somehow, it'll be Pitts. I think Waddle's going to go ahead of Smith because the weight is just going to scare the hell out of some teams. And I got to be honest. In my opinion, rightfully so. Not that he can't play, but that is a big risk. And if he doesn't work out, people are going to second guess you forever going, come on, man, he was 166 pounds. Of course it didn't work out. I'm rooting for him. But I think he's going to fall a little bit. I mean, certainly be first-round pick. I think he'll probably be, top 20 pick. But I could see him falling a little bit. And if he does fall, like if New England doesn't trade up and he gets to New England, if you're the Pats, you got to think about it. Because I know they signed Nelson Aguilar and Kendrick Bourne, but come on now, right? Like, you got to think about it.
The Giants, by the way, just to stop you there, I feel like the Giants is the perfect fit for Smith. Now, the Smith, pro comparisons when I watch him, and just, to touch on his college thing too, you put up his stats and success and what he did at the college level.
Incredible.
And not only is it incredible, and I know it's hard to do these legacy things so smallly removed from where we just were, he's going to be in the discussion at some point as one of the greatest college football wide receivers of all time.
Yes.
He just is. Now, Giant fan, here's where we're talking about Smith, why it would be such a great pick. Because I look at him as a mix between Marvin Harrison and a quieter Odell Beckham Jr. Where, Odell, because he's such an athlete, we almost forget that he's not a 6'3", 6'4" receiver just because he gets up in the air and makes these plays. But he's suffered injuries and can take hits and knock him out of games and everything else. And Marvin Harrison, not a big guy, but got smart in the league and made sure he didn't take those hits.
Yep.
That could be a great fit for the Giants. I think that should be the guy, Giant fan. If you see Smith on the board when the Giants hit the clock, you as a fan run to the podium and put the pick in for him. It'd be a great fit for that team going forward.
I agree. And listen, I love his talent. I do worry about the size. I do. I can't, I know in this day and age, everybody's so pro player that you're like this egregious heretic hater if you feel a certain way about it. I do think, though, if you're the Giants, he'd be a perfect fit. And again, according to Matt Lombardo with us over at Fansided, there have been some people around the league who have told him, look, they think that's where he's going to end up. So something to keep in mind. But I do think those 3 kids will go in the top 15 picks at worst. And then you start getting into everybody else, the Rashad Batemans of the world and the Elijah Moore and Rondelle Moore. I think, but look, you're gonna have a good half dozen receivers going in the first round. I don't think there's any question. It's a very deep class. When I talked to one GM a week ago, 10 days ago maybe, who told me this class is loaded at offensive line, at receiver, and at corner, and at quarterback. So those 4 positions. Everywhere else wasn't thrilled about the draft. But those 4 positions, if that's what you need, you're in really good shape.
We quickly glossed over the Patriots. I want to bring up New England for the fact that this whole offseason and going into the draft day, I continue to get confused just by the Patriots. I think that's the best word to use because for people who study this and research the players and everything else, whatever should be the pick never seems to be the pick for Belichick because he wins. He kind of gets a pass in the draft. Now with a very active offseason and some additions that need to be made, the Patriots of maybe all 32 NFL teams seem to be the team that I'm the most interested in how they're going to handle this draft. We've touched on wide receiver. Do you find New England as maybe the overall most intriguing team of how they're going to handle this year's draft?
They're one of them. Look, I would still not be surprised if they trade a first-round pick for Garoppolo.
Wow.
They love Jimmy Garoppolo. Belichick loves him. And they basically are forced into making that trade because Brady just never was going to retire and still may never retire. The Niners can sit there all day long and say, yeah, we really love to bring in Jimmy G and have him compete with, whoever it is, Mac Jones. No, you don't. That's a lie. That's an outright lie. You just traded 2 first-round picks. You'd love to recoup one of them. And Jimmy Garoppolo sitting on the bench or getting hurt again next year is not helping his value. So if the Pats don't make that move, I think they've got to look into adding another weapon. Like I wrote over at Fansided, they added $259 million worth of free agents, and I don't know that they got any better. I love Judon. He's the one exception. Everybody else, it's like, did they get any better with this? I mean, they traded away Marcus Cannon. They replaced him with Trent Brown. Like Trent Brown's been awful with the Raiders. A receiver, okay, Edelman's now gone. I get it. He didn't play much last year anyway. You bring in Aguilar with a nice year with the Raiders, but otherwise has not been good. You bring in Kendrick Bourne, who's a guy. Hunter Henry and Johnny Smith, everybody goes crazy. Those 2 guys now have the 3rd highest cap hit in NFL history for a tight end. They each have $12.5 million. They're only behind Kittle and Kelsey. Johnny Smith has never had 450 receiving yards in a season. Ever. And people act like they just signed Jason Witten in his prime. He's never had 450 receiving yards, and Hunter Henry's never had 700. It's crazy to me. Travis Kelce had more yards last year than both of them combined. I look at them and I say, yeah, that's great. You're still winning 8 games. To me, they got to have a better quarterback. And, or at least add more offense to this team. I know that sounds weird after what they did in the offseason. They spent so much money on, but I don't think they did much in terms of actually improving the product. So they got a ways to go. But to catch Buffalo, they're going to have to add a lot because Buffalo, to me, far and away is the best team in that division right now.
Yes, it's weird, it's confusing, it's frustrating. It's all those different words to describe the Patriots. It is entertaining, though, because they might be the most talked about team when the draft ends up, the ways in which Bill Belichick handles this and the potential trade, as you noted there, maybe for Garoppolo. You said the word the Buffalo Bills. Travis Etienne, the running back out of Clemson. The Bills have been trying to find the running game. Here's the tough part about it, and maybe you're feeling the same sense about this. Buffalo is down at the bottom in that first round, and what makes it so difficult is you might hope for a running back. We saw this years ago with the Giants and Buccaneers when it was Doug Martin and David Wilson who went back-to-back because they both wanted a running back. They started to trade up over one another. And you sometimes see teams who want a quarterback jump into that first round because of the contract situation. Do the Bills focus on a position, best player available, which I know is cliche, but it seems like that's the way you may have to handle that bottom of a first round.
I have a different opinion than a lot of Bills fans who I know would love a running back. Look, you got to beat one team in the AFC because you're better than all the rest of them. You got to beat Kansas City. And I'm telling you right now, nobody in Kansas City gives a shit if the Bills draft a running back. Nobody.
Right. It's totally true.
Nobody cares. Okay? I go on Kansas City radio all the time. I'm very familiar with the organization. I'm very, very familiar with everything that is the Chiefs, obviously even a little more so than everybody else in the league, just considering my background, how I came up and whatnot. The biggest thing the Bills could do to close the gap is add an edge rusher. You do not beat the Chiefs if you don't get pressure on Mahomes. You're not beating them. I don't care who your running back is. I don't care if Diggs leads the league in yardage receiving again. I don't care if Allen is. None of it matters. You have no shot if you don't get to Mahomes. Okay? The Buccaneers beat the piss out of Kansas City. And it's because they hit them all game. The Niners almost won that Super Bowl. The Niners, for 53 minutes, held the Chiefs to 10 points because the Chiefs couldn't block them. And the Niners ran out of gas for 7 minutes, and the Chiefs scored 21 points. You're not beating the Chiefs if you can't get pressure. And when the Bills played the Chiefs last year, they sacked Mahomes once in each game, and he carved them up. He just killed them. If I'm the Bills, whoever that best edge rusher is, or even if you find the interior rusher you love, that's what I'm doing. Because that's the goal. look, you're going to win the East if you're healthy. I believe they're clearly better than everybody in the South. I believe they're better than everybody in the North. They beat Baltimore last year. I believe that wasn't a fluke. I think they're better than Pittsburgh. I think they're better than Cleveland. The Bills have to beat Kansas City. And right now, they're not equipped to do it because they cannot hit Mahomes. That, to me, has to be – like, if I'm the Bills, I'm not only drafting an edge rusher in the first round, I'm signing Justin Houston. Like, I'm going out and getting myself multiple edge rushers here. Because if they do it, I think they can go to the Super Bowl. If they don't do it, I think they're going to come up as a bridesmaid again in the AFC because I don't think they have enough up front. Mario Addison and Jerry Hughes, it's not enough. So I'd go edge rusher.
There you go, Bills fans. It might come down to that of what happens. You want to take the next step. How much fun would it be if out in LA, the Buffalo Bills, the Bills Mafia invades the West Coast? They were so close a season ago. Maybe we get to see that team out in Western New York go back to the Super Bowl, and it could start with that pick there in the first round. You touched on about J.J. Watt in the past you might have missed and the evaluations of Patrick Mahomes. I'm going to give you a nice open forum here. You can pick one player. Either way, we'll do a positive and a negative, but I kind of want to lean on the positive more.
Okay.
Matt Verderame gets to say, you know what, guys? If we tape a podcast 2 years from now or 5 years from now, I told you on your 2021 NFL Draft Preview Show brought to you by Hooters right there on Wolf Road, Hooters of Albany. You loved this player, and it worked out. Trevor Lawrence can count, but if you're going to use Lawrence, give me another one.
Yeah, no, I'm not gonna. I mean, Lawrence, I think everybody. I'll try to give guys who aren't top 5 picks. I love Asante Samuel Jr. I think he's going to be now. In full disclosure, I interviewed him. I talked with him. I wrote about him in my column a little bit. He told me a story about how a year ago he was working out in the offseason, and he worked out with Antonio Brown. And they got into it. Like they were scuffling a little bit. And he's like, I was not going to back down to him. I was going to show him that I'm every bit the dog that he is. And I was like, all right. Like, I like that. I like that in the corner. You watch his tape. He's a competitive dude, man. He's not that big, but he fights like hell. He's got those bloodlines. I'm a big believer in bloodlines. I think Patrick Surtain, by the way, also going to be very good. I love it. I love the scrap, the fight. I think Samuel's going to be a real good corner in this league. And I think this, by the way, he's one of many. I think he's a really good corner draft. Okay, I think Surtain's good. Horn is going to be really good. I love Newsome out of Northwestern. But I love Asante Samuel. I think he's going to be a first rounder, by the way. Some people see a first, a second. I think he's going to be, right in that 25 to 32 range. So that's a guy I really like. And then I'm not going to bag on anybody necessarily. I think there are some guys who might get a little overdrafted, and I think a lot of that is functions of teams just saying, well, we got to have X in this draft. We got to get 3 offensive linemen, so we got to start right now. And even though this guy might be a reach, we're going to take him. I think that happens a lot. But best player available is a myth a lot of the times. But some teams reach way more than other teams. Like last year, the Raiders taking Damon Arnett. Nothing against Damon Arnett, but nobody thought he should go that high, and I think that kind of bared out his first year. I think this year the edge rushers, and I just talked about it with the Bills, but I think the Bills and other teams have to be careful. There are guys like Jalen Phillips, who I think deserve to go in the first round. The kid out of Georgia, who I'll never pronounce his name right, Ajalari, I believe it's pronounced. He's a guy who's a first-round pick. But there are some other guys that are just going to get slotted in there that probably shouldn't go that high. And I think that's where you start again. That's where you start getting in trouble a little bit. I'm curious to see how that all like one name I'll give you. Okay, and we talked about this a little bit earlier. Jason, again, I'm so bad with names when they're in college. Owe, I believe it is.
Yes.
Okay. Now listen, nothing against him. I don't know the kid from Adam. I'm not a draft expert. I'm far more of an expert in free agency. I talk to people in the league all the time. The draft, it's more I'm learning as everybody else is. But I get his tape is good. He had no sacks last year. And people are like, well, he might be a first round pick. How? At some point, it's like drafting a kid in the first round in Major League Baseball. You're like, well, he hit 215, but he's got a great swing. Okay. He had 215. Like, so that's the kind of guy that, like, maybe he proves out to be great. And I hope I'm wrong. I hope he is. I hope he's an all-pro. I hope the guy goes on to make an incredible career for himself. But I always worry about those high upside guys who it's like it's all based off projection. I guess that's the best way to put it. And I think Owe is a guy who's a good example of that this year.
Yeah, we are more production than projection, you and I. That's where we both side. Like, hey, if you actually make plays and are good, we think you can be good at the next level.
It's always like, remember that guy who, he ran a 4.4 at 300 pounds. Like, that's great. He's terrible.
He's not even good. Right.
I remember years ago, Obi Melifonwu. Remember him?
Yes.
Then he was a safety out of UConn, and nobody knew who he was, and he tested out of his mind at the combine. And after that, it was like, oh, got to take him. Got to take. It's like, no, you don't. He jumps high. Like, that's not a reason to take him. But I'll throw out, by the way, a few sleepers. Aleem McNeil, D tackle out of North Carolina State. I talked to some people around him. Fun fact about him: in high school, he's 275 pounds. He played running back. Okay, now he's a defensive tackle. Played running back. He also was a corner outfielder at 275. Like, that's a man that can move. Okay, that's some athleticism. Like, you had 275 pounds. Hey, Aleem, go out and right. Okay, like, interesting guy. A guy who's gotten better every year. He's someone I watch. And then Walker Little, who's a tackle who's going to get forgotten by a lot of people out of Stanford. He has not played much recently, injuries and whatnot. But that kid. I'm good friends with Jeff Schwartz. He used to do the podcast when we stacked the box over at Fansided, and we've remained good friends since. And Jeff loves Pac-12 ball. He went to Oregon. He is pounding the table for Walker Little. When I went and watched a little bit of film, you could see why. He's really talented. I think he's a day two guy, but he's really talented. Yeah,
a lot of guys you just covered there. And you mentioned Melifonwu, by the way. His brother is in this year's draft. Yep. He was one of the guys I wrote down as well out of Syracuse. Byron Jones is another guy from UConn who did something similar where he just jumped off the charts. Everyone's like, oh, my God, look at his stats.
He worked out.
Yeah, exactly right. He actually did work out on that side of it. Some other names I wrote down here for players that, again, if you're not a fan of a New York team, but you see this name pop up, whether it's day 1, day 2, or day 3, get excited about it. I like Rondelle Moore out of Purdue. I know he barely played, but when he was on the field, he was one of the most productive players in the Big Ten in the 2019 season. I got a little biased here with my Syracuse guys, but I truly believe Trill Williams was one of my favorite players because he's got that swag, and you need that as a secondary guy. Andre Cisco was the best prospect, arguably, since Dwight Freeney and Chandler Jones. Remember, Chandler Jones was undersized just weight-wise. Now, it helped out when your brothers are John Jones and Art Jones. And Dwight Freeney was short for a defensive end. Cisco doesn't have those knocks on him. And the only reason his draft stock has plummeted a little bit is because he got hurt. Because he got hurt in warm-ups stepping on a teammate's foot. Not only got hurt in a game, he got hurt in warm-ups. So just some names to look out there too. Moore from Purdue. The guys, the defensive backs from Syracuse could be some standout players as well. I mentioned Travis Etienne. I know running backs are always fun. I think when fantasy football starts that conversation again in a few months, if he lands in the right spot, he could have one of those really fun, productive seasons if you're a fantasy football player. And for the players who I don't think are very good, quarterback is always the way I lean. I got to see this Trey Lance thing. Like, I just don't get it. I know North Dakota State's so good. People went wild for Carson Wentz, and we could argue what Wentz's career has been, whether or not it's been successful or not. Yes, he won a Super Bowl, but he wasn't playing. Yes, he got a monster contract, and some people say that's success enough. You get that second contract, you won. We got to see. I'm very fascinated by how people love Trey Lance so much. I think we've covered it all. I think we just did a great NFL draft preview. Is there anything else you want to give some love to? Do you want to shout out Fansided social media where if people are hanging at Hooters, they want to follow you guys if this big trade goes down, any of that stuff you want to make sure to plug for Fansided and you on draft night?
It's all about the brand, right? So if you want to follow me on Twitter, @Matt Verderame, Verderame. God did not bless me with an easy name to spell. At Fansided.com, we are going to have a ton of coverage. So if you're there, check it out. Download the Fansided app onto your phone. Customize it the way you like it. And then look, please check out Stacking the Box podcast. Obviously, you listen to Goz's podcast first, but then if you got some extra time in the commute or the car, you're just trying to get away from your kids, Stacking the Box once a week, goes up usually every Tuesday. It's an hour long. During the season, it's twice a week. And it's myself and Mark Carman, and we break down the entire National Football League. We have a lot of fun. Next week, we're going to have George Kittle on the show. So check it out. Check it out. Subscribe, leave a rating, leave a review. And if you leave a rating and you leave a review and you leave a question in the review, we'll answer it.
Look at that. That's how you plug it right there. I'm going to write in my notes. I was going to say download, subscribe, rate, and review. That's even better. You leave a question in the review. You're on the podcast. I am going to steal that from you for future episodes. I'm sad we can't hang out at Hooters. I owe you a beer and some wings the next time we get to hang out and everything else. Keep crushing it, man. I kept you really long. I know you're super busy, especially as we get closer and closer to draft day. Matt, appreciate your time as always and enjoy the draft coming up.
Thanks a lot, guys. Take care.